This is one of those Sunday mornings when I'd rather be in a cave than preaching. Elijah the prophet, after his great victory at Mount Carmel, he went running for his life, and he ended up in a cave. And after all that's gone on this week, in the last few weeks, you may be here thinking a lot of what I'm thinking. I really don't want to be here today. I just feel like crawling into a turtle shell and stand there. I'd rather just weep by myself because we've seen so much trouble and we've seen so much loss. Reminds me what Scott Peck wrote in his book, The Road Less Traveled. His first line was, "Life is difficult." Boy, is that the truth. Life is hard. And we feel it on weeks like this, on months like this, years like this. We've experienced our share of loss, haven't we? A husband who recently lost his wife looked at me at the funeral service after the service was over and the body had been put into the hearse, and he looked straight at me and he said, "Now what do I do?" And I didn't know what to say because I don't have any quick answers for people who are in that situation. So profound his loss. And this weekend we remember those soldiers, American soldiers who've made the ultimate sacrifice so that we might live free. But this is an occasion which prompts us to do more than just remember the loss of soldiers, but to remember our losses here at Southside, to remember your losses in your families and your friends. I was thinking of men like Melvin Jones, Mason Smith, of couples like Lawrence and Murtis Wagner, Guy Cable, Bill Bohannon, Dave Williams, or those lesser known to us but much beloved, Betty Jo Allen, Gail Lockridge, and others. Your loved ones, your moms, your dads, your brothers, your sisters, your friends. People we used to rely on for guidance and friends who are no longer with us, and we feel their absence with a sort of dull ache. But for those who have lost loved ones recently, it's really more searing pain still. The loss is very heavy. We've suffered over the death of 21 in Uvalde, Texas. 19 children. So I saw those kids running out this morning, our angels. It's unbelievable the pain that we all feel. And then 10 in Buffalo, New York. Senseless killings, random shootings. Diseases have enhanced our fear levels. We've replaced our fear of COVID with monkeypox now. So when is it going to end? People are so afraid. And we just got to stop and weep for the pain in the world. So I got no quick answers for you today. And I'm not going to give you a 1, 2, 3. Here's how to get past this. I'm not here to do that today. I'm here to tell you who to run to. And you just run to him in whatever way you see fit. To sing to him, to pray to him, to spend time with him and his word, and to just be quiet before him and weep. Because there are no easy answers, and sometimes there's just no answers at all for what's been going on in our world. But there is the one answer, the one person you can run to who will hear you always and who will help. And that is the God of heaven. I want to share with you 4 verses from Psalm 61, which will kind of be our anchor point for our thoughts this morning. Hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer. From the ends of the earth I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint. Lead me to the rock that's higher than I. For you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the foe. I long to dwell in your tent forever and take refuge in the shelter of your wings. The ancient theologian Athanasius once wrote, "The Psalms have a unique place in the Bible because most of the Scripture speaks to us. The Psalms speak for us." I think he has something there. I spend a lot of time in the Psalms when I'm feeling heavy and burdened with the world and the suffering in it, and in my own personal suffering, which we all have. You know, I was looking at that verse 1 in this passage. Hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer. That word for cry means in Hebrew a piercing cry or a scream. You know, the word cry has come to be softened. Here in verse 1, there's no softness about this. This is a cry out to God, a scream. Lord, listen to me. I can't bear it anymore. And whatever was going on in David's life at this time, when he wrote Psalm 61, he was in dire straits because it's a psalm that essentially begins with the word help. Help, please. It seems that in recent months, a dark cloud has just overspread the sky. We just walk around in rain, not just literal, but figurative. Loss and frustration. And if you ever felt like your prayers don't reach the ceiling, maybe you need to just get a little louder, like David did. You know, it's not wrong to cry out to God and to empty your load on Him, to ask the hard questions. He's not offended by your questions. He's not frustrated with your inquiries about why. David says, help from the ends of the earth. I call to you. I cry. From the ends of the earth. Maybe at this moment you feel close to God. You've had many successes and things are going well, and you haven't lost anyone in a while. Wonderful. We thank God for that. We thank God that your way is easy. But I know for a great many of us, the way is not easy today. So maybe you can put this on the back burner if things are going well with you and prepare for the day that things won't go so well. Because Satan is not evil, and Satan is not going to let you go through life without being tested and tried and attacked. God's children are prime targets of the evil one. And right now, if you're going through not going through much, that's great. But if you are, these are for you. This is for you today. Some of you feel chest pains. Your heart hurts so much. Now, I'm not talking about physical pain, but that pain in your heart, that brokenness, that actually causes heart pain, physical pain, that you can feel it. You feel like, he says, from the ends of the earth I call to you. Don't miss this. David was saying, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm in the cheap seats at the ballpark. I feel like I'm way out there. I remember growing up. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I won't apologize for that. I had no choice in the matter. I moved to Arkansas and I never moved back. And I'm an Arkansas through and through. You see my T-shirts and Razorback colors. But I remember we used to go to the Detroit Tiger ball games. Doug, where are you? I know you've been. Yeah. Back at Tiger Stadium, when bleacher seats were $1. Bleacher seats. Now, that's like way out there. The old Tiger Stadium, that center field wall was what, 440? 440. and then the bleachers were above that, you were a mile from home plate. But you could get in. You could get in and watch a game real cheap. Now, if you wanted to get a box seat, now that cost you considerably more. But David says, I'm not in the box seats here. I'm calling you from the ends of the earth. I'm in the cheap seats, Lord. I wonder if you hear me at all. At Razorback Stadium, I have had the privilege of sitting down on the main level. But before I knew anybody, before anybody cared about my soul, I always had to take the cheap seats. You know where the cheap seats are? If you have acrophobia, you don't want to be up there. If you're afraid of heights is what I'm saying. Because it's way up there. It's so far up that when you stand up to cheer, you're looking like this down. You're looking down so far that you think, oh my goodness, I'm going to fall forward, and you could get dizzy pretty easily. Lord, from the cheap seats I call to you from the ends of the earth. You feel like your prayers are long distance, and you mourn because you've been praying to God, and it doesn't seem like anything's been going on. Like God doesn't answer you. Allow me to tell you about a woman who felt like she was in the cheap seats, and she refused to stay there. She cried out. Jesus, at this point in Jesus' ministry, in Mark chapter 5, it was a time of great outpourings of power. I mean, great outpourings of power. And he was healing people. He was casting out demons, even raising the dead. Here he is, prepared to go to the home of a little girl, the synagogue ruler's daughter. She was 12, and she was very ill. The synagogue ruler said, Lord, I need you to come. You know, the synagogue ruler had box seats. You know, I can get through the crowd because of who I am. I can talk directly to Jesus of Nazareth, the great healer. But there was a woman who was not allowed in the synagogue, who was not allowed in the temple, and was considered unclean by her family because of the law of Moses. Because she had an issue of blood, she constantly had hemorrhaging. And this had gone on for a long time. We do not know her name, but there's this one woman who was determined to get close to Christ. She had been to doctors to stop this flow of blood. Now think about this, ladies. 12 years with a flow of blood. 12 years. Under Mosaic law, she wouldn't have been allowed in the synagogue, the temple, or anywhere else public. She was really more or less commanded to stay home. Anywhere she touched was unclean. Anywhere she was unclean. And here's this lady. And in Mark 5, verse 24, we read, a large crowd followed and pressed around Jesus, around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up from behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, the disciples answered, and yet you can ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear told him the whole truth. He said to her daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. I love it that the Lord would not allow her to stay in the cheap seats. She wasn't going to just grab a hold of his garment and then disappear into the crowd. Jesus kept turning around. I see him doing 360s and asking, where are you? somebody touched me, somebody touched me. Finally, Jesus is so insistent that he find out who it is, that this woman is stricken with guilt and fear, and she falls down before him, and she weeps, and she said, "It was me." She's scared to death of what might happen. And Jesus, I can see him breaking into this beautiful smile for this woman who probably looked like she was half dead, sallow and pale from the loss of blood for 12 years, with no B12 or iron infusions, no blood transfusions in those days. And here she is, having bled for 12 years. She very well could have been risking her life to just get to Jesus and to fight through the crowd and to touch the hem of his garment. And here he looks at her and he says, "Your faith, daughter, your faith has healed you. Be freed from your suffering." He'd healed her, but he said, I need you to be freed from your suffering. Isn't that a beautiful statement? He'd already provided the healing. The healing was not all of the source of her, the illness was not all the source of her suffering. It was how she'd been shunted off to the side, how she'd been forgotten, how she had been considered unclean, how she was so alone. And Jesus said, "Come on, be freed from your suffering." And in that moment, her life completely changed because she refused to stay a distance. She called from the far ends of the earth to Jesus and got a personal, one-on-one blessing. She went to the rock that was higher than she was. The next thing I want to look at in Psalm 61 is that Yahweh is our strong tower. That idea that the Lord Almighty is a strong tower is not something isolated to Psalm 61. It was already read this morning in Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. How long has it been since you've run to take refuge from something? I mean, run to take refuge. For most of us, it's probably been a while. For some of us, we wouldn't even dare run. But imagine racing to a place of safety. Many years ago, many years ago, I won't tell you how long, but we were at a church in Northeast Arkansas where I was helping with, Deb and I were helping with a vacation Bible school. This was post-marriage, pre-children. So we were still living in Searcy at the time. And so we were at this little congregation, and it was an early summer vacation Bible school. And these folks in Northeast Arkansas know what tornadoes are. They really do, and they have more than a healthy respect for them, kind of like our friends in Oklahoma do, and like recently, some of us in Springdale now do. But you know, in the middle of the night, this lady, she woke us up out of a restful, sound sleep and said, "We need to go." And I said, "Why?" And we were just we were unconscious, for a few months. "We've got to go, and we've got to go now." I said, "Why?" "There's a storm coming." I said, "A storm? Oh, okay." See, I've never been in a tornado. She said, "Well, I've been in a tornado, and they've got tornado warnings out for us right now. We've got to go." Do you know, we just stumbled around, and we ran to a place that had a storm shelter. I mean, we stepped on it, got on the car. It wasn't very far, and then we were hustled in, and the door slammed behind us and locked. And I thought, I don't know that I've ever run for refuge like we did that night, the middle of the night. The storm, fortunately, passed over the house, but I'll never forget being awakened to run to a refuge. I thought about those storm shelters. Those storm shelters are towers turned upside down in the ground. That's what they are. They're just upside down towers. Strong refuge underground. You don't want to be in a tall tower when a tornado comes because it'll blow you right out of the tower. But a storm shelter is an inverted tower. There are disasters in life that are just too big for us. There are times when we simply must run for refuge and just, as one contemporary gospel singer says it, and just be held. That there's nothing really to do than to just trust Christ and say, and lean back on His everlasting arms and just say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I've cried myself out. I need some peace, and you just let go and be held. That is when God is our strong tower. You know, it's really a shame, but a great many people think that Christians should never get depressed, that Christians should never cry, because there's always an answer, and the minute you cry, someone's there to tell you, it's going to be, Christ is watching you, and all of that's true, but sometimes you just need to run into a tower and just stay there. Don't say anything. Words don't seem sufficient. In fact, words sometimes seem inappropriate. That it is okay to be blue and be a Christian. To mourn the suffering in the world and your own personal suffering without feeling guilty. For someone will come along and say, oh, you just don't have faith. Wait a minute. We're mourning. Part of the reason we're mourning is because we're wondering why, and our wondering why goes to God. We're not expressing disbelief or unbelief, but we certainly have some tough questions we'd like answered, and it's okay to just run to the refuge, the tower, and be safe. Have you seen the videos on YouTube of the tsunamis? I'm fascinated by tsunamis. They're so incredibly destructive. Oh, it's when you've got a camera that's some distance away, it shelters you from some of the horror of what's happening. But when they had the Fukushima nuclear reactor meltdown, it had an earthquake and then a meltdown. But that earthquake caused a massive tsunami, which is just unspeakable in its horror. But you know what direction the people were running? Up. They ran up those streets into the mountains. Those that could make it to the hills got there, and they were safe. Sometimes you just got to run up. No time for explanation. No time to think about it. Just instinctively go to that place that's higher than you are. In Luke 13:34, it speaks of God being our refuge. I want to get there in just a minute, but I want to say something else before I jump to that, and then I'll be done. I'm not bringing any magic words here today, but I am showing the place where you run. This past week, I'll tell you what I've done to run to Jesus, okay? I'll just tell you what I've done. Personal, everybody has their way of doing it. But I have been singing to myself the He is Exalted song that we've been introduced to, that Lee's been leading recently. I think we led it this morning. The highly exalted. And I thought, I don't know why, I just started singing it instinctively. And I've sung it all week to myself. And I thought, how nourishing it is to just remember that, to sing it to myself, to sing it to God. That's what I'm doing. And how that's blessed me this week. I haven't even had words for prayer, but the songs seem to give wings to my words, so I sing. Maybe that's something you do. Maybe it's prayer that will do it for you. Maybe it's an old hymn. Maybe it's How Great Thou Art. Whatever it is, however you run to God, your strong tower, you run. Don't wait. And Yahweh is our refuge. He's called in verse 4, God is our refuge. We can seek shelter in the shadow of His wings. Kind of a mixed metaphor, isn't it? He's our refuge, but it speaks of Him being the shadow, to rest in the shadow of His wings. He is our safe place. If a chick is with a hen, mama hen puts the feathers over her young, and that's their safe place. And so it is ours. It's a feminine picture of God, of being very nurturing and protective of His children. In Luke 13:34, when Jesus was looking over the city of Jerusalem, and He grieved because Jerusalem didn't believe, and He said this, He said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. The idea of a refuge is a tender one. A tower, the hen's feathers, that's tender. For a tower, that's strength and power. To that rock that's higher, that's protection from the flood. But here we have a motherly God, a nurturing God, a refugee. That's all of us. We're all refugees. You know, a refugee is looking for a place of safety. A refuge is all about safety. It's the refugee's chief concern is safety. They want little else. I did a little bit of research about refugees, and I thought of all the suffering that's been going on in Ukraine, and I know some of you have friends in Russia and Ukraine, and particularly in Ukraine where so much suffering has taken place. Do you know that 7.5 million Ukrainians have sought refuge in other countries? There are many others trying to get out of the country, but the UN reports 7.5 million have made their way out of the country. Poland has been a refuge for 3.5 million of those 7.5 million Ukrainians. More personally, we have a friend who flew to a Balkan nation and another friend who moved to Israel because she's Jewish. And you know what? When they sought refuge, you know what they did? They left everything behind. I can't imagine. I got a garage full of stuff. I got so much stuff in my garage and my attic, I can't get any more in my house. We go out and look for stuff. You know, we want to pick up a pretty thing, and I say, where are we going to put it? And I have something against buying rental space for storage. It's just a quirk of mine. I say, good grief. And these people in Ukraine left everything except a suitcase. And that contained clothes, pictures. That was it. They left everything behind. It came as troubling to us to find out that Dnipro, where Deb had a lot of contact with folks there in Dnipropetrovsk. In Dnipro, they're now missiling places, homes, apartment flats. Everybody lives in a flat. Nobody lives in a house, not unless you're really rich. Everybody, and they missile these places. 30 people died the day before yesterday. 30 in one apartment complex that had been bombed by the Russians. And so that's why they're getting out. They're seeking a refuge. Folks who seek refuge in God run to Him because they got nowhere else to go. Do we forget that we can't just amble ever so relaxed and say, well, Lord, I guess I no, it's desperate. This kind of refuge it calls out, it cries out, it's feeling like I'm way out there, I got to be heard. The flood is rising, I've got to get to higher ground. And I'll leave everything behind just to have my comfort in You, to be my refuge. You see, Satan is going to make life miserable if he can. He's looking for people to devour. He's been banished from heaven forever. Revelation says he's down here on the earth and he's angry because his time is short. He doesn't want us to have something he can never have. So Satan will do everything possible to get you to leave your refuge. We will be enticed to find refuge in possessions, in other things than God, in the pride of accomplishments, in a desire for things that we can see. When God's calling us to the things that we cannot see, to the things which last forever. Our refuge, the one who understands the danger and will protect us, is Jesus. He is our strong tower. Run to Him, because it's always going to be Jesus who will smile and lift up your head and tell you your faith has saved you. Now be freed from your suffering. You see, I can't give you the freedom from suffering. Only He can give you that. And He wants to. He wants to. So run to Him and be reminded that our God is still the King of the universe. He is still the Lord over all the living. He's still the one who will rescue you, who has the power to do it and to give you comfort. Let's bow together as we close. Father, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for your being that strong tower. It has been an exhausting few weeks. So many losses, so many deaths, so many tears. There'll be some that will be mourning the loss of loved ones this very day, who don't know which way to turn, who are working through their grief now. Father, I pray that we'd run to you and abandon all else, everything else, and just run to you. We can find that comfort in you. Remind us every day. Lord, in those days that we can't see you, I pray that you would make yourself seen to us so that we might recognize that you are still present with us. It sure gets quiet in heaven sometimes, Lord, and we need to see you. Lord, we know you're the King. You made heaven and earth, and so we ask you now to watch over us, comfort us. In Jesus' name, amen. This morning, if you need to come to Jesus for whatever the reason, maybe you're carrying a heavy burden of grief on your shoulders, we urge you to do that right now. We'll pray with you. We're not pretending to have the answers, but we do know the answer, the one who is our refuge from the tough questions. You can ask your tough questions, and God will hear you, and He will comfort you. And we stand and sing now, and let's join together as we worship God continually.